Let's assume I have a business in the United States that sells bicycles and their accessories. For today's tutorial, I'm going to use a simple data table in Excel, which is not more than a sales data of my bicycle business. I have column with the dates, a numbering code for my stores I'm having over the United States, the state of the different stores, receipt or invoice number, client ID, product ID, the commodity group of my products, the quantity I sold, and the price information. This table includes more than 300,000 rows. And by the way, quick tip, did you know that at the bottom where you have the base calculations for the columns, you can copy the actual values. For example, I'm going to select the column I where I have the sales price per each, and the Excel will do some basic math for me. But if I want to get the numbers, let's say the total value of this column, then I can simply click on the value and it's going to be cut on my clipboard, and if I hit Ctrl V, my value can be pasted on my Excel sheet. Okay, let's build the sales profit matrix with Power Query. I'm going to start as always with the data tab. I go to the ribbon, select data, get data from file. Our source is Excel file, so I'm going to select the Microsoft Excel workbook. Then I'm going to navigate to the folder where I have my raw data. I select the file and I'll hit import. From the navigator pane, obviously I need the table I have prepared. I hit transform data and the Excel will open up my query editor. As always, the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we have the proper format set for each column. So let's double check everything. Sales date formatted as a date, that's fine. Text, 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 that's what we need. I scroll to the right a little bit. Quantity sold, that's a whole number. I like it. Sales price each, let's say it's gonna be currency, and I replace the whole content, and I'm going to do the same for the product cost as well. I'm going to name my table, let's say 2023 sales data. I hit enter, and for sure, depending on what we want to achieve with this data, we could do a lot of transformation with the query. But this time I want to build a sales profit matrix, and the M language is not the best choice to run complex calculation. Therefore, I'm going to load my query to a data model in Excel. So I select close and load to, only create connection, and I check this box which says add this to the data model. I'll hit OK, and as you see, these 300,000 rows has been loaded to my data model just in a second. Then I go back to the data tab and I select the manage data model, and the Excel will open up a new graphical interface which is almost equivalent what you could see in the Power BI. So as always, I start with the formatting just to make sure that my DAX will work properly. I select the column, I go to the Home tab, and I'm going to select the proper format I want to see on my table. The date type is correct, but the displayed format is not what I want, so I'm going to change the date to be like this. The rest should be okay. The currency and the product cost as well. So once my formatting is done, I can start creating my calculations with DAX. Why do I need that? Because this sales table is very simple, and I want to understand my data a little bit better than what I can see from these numbers. So I can create additional calculations which will help me to deep dive in my data. The best technique I like to use is to group the value. But before I would do that, I need to calculate the profit for each sales item, right? So I need to add a calculated column. I'm going to double click on the column and enter profit there. Once the blank calculated column created, I can select the formula bar and enter my DAX. This is gonna be a very simple math, and it will look like this. Quantity sold times by the sell price each minus quantity sold times by the product cost each, hit enter. And in the next column I want to add my total sales, which is not more than the quantity sold times by the sell price each, hit enter. Same for the cost, total cost, enter. Quantity sold times by product cost each. And for sure I could use these two columns to get the profit as well, but at least I had the chance to show you how to do simple math calculations in DAX. The next calculation I want to add is the profit percentage or margin percentage. So I'm going to enter profit percentage. As we all know, it's very simple. Profit divided by the total sales. Enter. I get a different value, so I'm going to select the proper format. Now I think we have all the base calculations what we need to build our sales matrix. However, we need to start grouping our values, which will help us to visualize the actual values in a matrix. So the next column is going to be a group for my profit percentage. Now I'm going to name profit group. And why do I need that? Because I want to compare my profit percentage against to my sales. I'm going to open up the formula bar to make it a little bit bigger, since this DAX is going to be a little bit longer than the previous one. In order to calculate those groups in my table, I'm going to use a variable in my DAX. If I want to use a variable in the DAX, I need to start like this. VAR, let's name profit group, equal with something. Since the DAX doesn't know how to group it automatically, we have to define a way for it. So it's like we build a decision-making process for the DAX, like you would do an if or a nested if statement in Excel. So let's see how I do an if statement in DAX. I'm going to use the switch and the true functions to define my decision-making process. Switch true is very simple. It's saying switch the values of the variable if the statement is true what I set in my DAX. So the first statement I'm going to set looks like this. Profit percentage less than or equal to 0, then I want to get back this result. And let's use simple text tags to display these different groups. So I'm going to say underscore less than or equal with 0 underscore double quote. Shift enter, and I can start enter my next statement. Sales profit bigger than 0 and less than or equal with 0.1, which is 10%. Then I want to get back this flag. Let's say 0, 10% underscore. And now I'm going to repeat this process to set all the groupings. So I'm going to just simply copy paste the same statements with different values. As you see, I have set all my statements to make the proper decision about my value grouping, and right now I have 11 different groups to understand my data better. And the statements are very simple. So if the profit percentage is between 0.2 and 0.3, then I want to get this flag back as a value in my column. So if my statement is done, the last thing I need to do is to get the value back, and in DAX you will say return, and that's the value of the variable. So I'm going to start typing the name of the variable, what I have predefined, and the DAX will automatically list out all the options. So I'm going to select the variable I need, hit enter, and let the DAX to make the magic for me. I'm going to close the formula bar, and as you see, the DAX grouped my values. And now we can start building the first sales matrix on the Excel graphical interface. What I need to do is to go back to the Home tab and select Pivot Table, and from here you have multiple options, but this time I'm going to choose the first one, which is not more than a simple pivot table. Then my data is going to be dumped into a pivot table memory, and the Excel will ask me if I want to load my pivot onto a new sheet or on an existing one. Let's say I'm going to load my pivot on the existing sheet 1, hit OK, and my pivot table has been created with the connected data set. And now I can start building my matrix. As you see the icon, it's not a simple table but a data set. I see all the columns, the calculated columns. There are multiple ways to display the actual data in a matrix, but we are going to use just one example this time. So let's say I want to see how the different states are performing in my business. So I'm going to move the states field into the rows. I want the profit groups as column, then I want the total sales as value. And as you see, my basic matrix has been created, but I want to build a simple dashboard to make it more visual. And what I can see from here, for example, Iowa, let's pick this state, their total sales was more than $1.4 million. That sounds very good. So what I can see from these values, if I look at each value under the different groups, then I can see that the majority of the sales was running on this profit for Iowa. So more than $1 million had more than 80% of margin on each item, which sounds very good. And from the total numbers, I can understand better where I should improve my business. So for example, if I pick the first 4 groups, the profit percentage below 30%, and I can see that I have almost $1.5 million running on a bad margin. If I want to get the actual details, then I just simply need to select the value, double click, and the pivot will list out the line items from my sales data. But this time let's go back and let's build a simple dashboard to make it more user-friendly. First I go to the View tab, I'm going to remove the grid lines, and let's insert some rows and columns to make some place for my objects I'm going to add to my dashboard. So let's open up the columns as well, say 2023 sales data, hit enter. I'm going to change this label as well, saying profit group, the row labels, US state, and as you remember we had dates assigned to our data, so we can add a filter to see the different months as well. And this time I'm going to insert a slicer, so I'm going to select my pivot table and hit the timeline type of slicer. It will recognize automatically which field has date. I'm going to select the sales date and it will insert a slicer. I need to insert some more rows. I select my pivot table again, and the next slicer I'm going to add is probably the product group. I move a little bit up and change the structure a little bit. Let's add one more column, make a little bit wider, maybe 3 columns, and I have my product groups available. Then I'm going to add one more slicer. Let's say that's gonna be my store code. Same thing, I'm going to change the structure a little bit. Let's say 3 columns, make a little bit wider and shorter. And to make it more visual, I'm going to set some conditional formatting. I'm select the grand total columns. Let's say I want solid fill for each value. I'm going to bold the values at the total, set the same size for the group, align them a little bit, and then I want to highlight the different values. So I'm going to set another conditional formatting. Let's say less than 1,000, and I'm going to say between 1,001 and 10,000, and I'm going to use a different color. Let's highlight the really big values like 1 million. Let's say those are going to be the green. For sure you can customize it as you wish, but this time we are going to build just a simple dashboard. Once that's done, I can start deep dive into my data with using the different slicers. Since my data set covers the whole year, therefore I can select a month what I want to understand better, and if I want to see an actual product group to make sure that the business goes well, then I can use the different slicers and see the different values of my stores.